Look upon a map of the ancient world. You will see the familiar lights of history. Rome, a sprawling giant. Persia, a heart of culture. China, a distant titan. But then your eyes travel to the heart of Africa, and you see nothing. A dark spot, a void where there should be a beacon. This was not an empty land. This was the grave of the Aksumite Empire, a superpower that vanished so completely it feels less like history and more like a ghost story. It did not just fall, it was erased, leaving behind an unsettling silence that echoes with questions that have no answers. To understand the horror of its disappearance, you must first understand its power. The Aksumite Empire was not a minor kingdom. It was a contemporary of Rome, named by the prophets of its time as one of the four great powers of the world. It was a civilization of immense wealth, controlling the vital trade routes of the Red Sea and the River Nile, the arteries of the ancient global economy. They carved their history into the sky with colossal stone obelisks, some of the largest single stone structures ever erected. They developed a unique written language, Ge'ez, the ancestor of modern Ethiopian scripts. This was a titan, a center of innovation and faith, a bastion of Christianity in the heart of Africa, a power that should have left a legacy as bright as Rome's. Then the first omen appeared. The world itself turned against Aksum. Around the year 540, the climate began to change with unnatural speed. This was no simple drought. The sky, once a source of life, became a curse. The monsoon rains that fed the empire's terraced farms grew violent and unpredictable. The rich soil, the foundation of Aksum's strength, was washed away in sudden, devastating floods. Fields that had fed a superpower for centuries turned to barren rock. Famine became a quiet, constant companion, a gnawing hunger that weakened the empire from the inside, hollowing it out long before its enemies arrived. This was a slow, creeping horror, a curse written in dust and cracked earth. The people of Aksum, who had mastered stone and trade, could do nothing but watch as their world withered around them. The land itself was rejecting them. Then came the second omen, a whispering death that arrived on the very trade ships that had made Aksum rich. The plague of Justinian, a pestilence that crippled empires across the known world, did not spare this African power. It was an invisible hunter, stalking the crowded ports and market cities, moving silently from person to person. History tells us of its terror, the sudden fevers, the madness that seized the mind, and the dark, swollen growths that marked the victim for a swift, agonizing end. It was more than a disease. It was a spectral force that drained the empire of its people, leaving cities half empty and the fields untended. The living were too few to bury the dead. As Aksum reeled from these internal wounds, the world outside sealed its fate. In the 7th century, the Rashidun Caliphate rose with astonishing speed, a new faith and a new power that redrew the map of the world. This was not just a new rival, it was the drawing of a final impenetrable curtain. The Red Sea, once Aksum's highway to the world, became a hostile barrier controlled by a different faith. The trade routes that were the empire's lifeblood were severed. Aksum, the Christian titan, was now an island, cut off from its allies, its markets, and its place in the world. It became a ghost on the map, isolated and alone, left to face the growing darkness by itself. Then, from the south, a new terror arose. A figure from legend known as Gudit, or the Fire. She was not just a queen or a conqueror. In the terrified whispers that survived her, she was something more ancient, a human vessel for a wrath that had festered for centuries. Her war was not for land or for tribute. It was a spiritual crusade of annihilation. Ethiopian tradition paints her as a pagan queen, a zealot who saw Aksum's Christian faith as a poison in the heart of Africa. She came not to rule the empire, but to burn its very soul from the earth. Imagine her armies, a scourge moving through the highlands. This was not a conventional war of soldiers. It was a campaign of utter destruction, targeting not just armies, but the very symbols that held the Aksumite world together. It was a physical manifestation of a curse, leaving behind a legacy of absolute fear. Her rage was precise, almost ritualistic. She aimed her fire at the spiritual pillars of the empire. She is said to have laid siege to the monastery of Dibre Damo, a holy fortress perched atop a sheer cliff accessible only by rope. For the monks inside, it was the end of 1,000 years of prayer, but her ultimate target was the holiest site in the Aksumite Empire, and perhaps in all of Christendom, the Church of Our Lady, Mary of Zion. This was not merely a building, it was the heart of their faith, the sanctuary believed to house the sacred Ark of the Covenant. To destroy it was to destroy their connection to God. This was a deliberate act of erasure. Each church burned, each monument toppled, was part of a ceremony to unmake a civilization. Gudit was not just conquering a kingdom, she was attempting to delete its history, to silence its story forever, ensuring that only a ghost of its memory would remain. And this leads to the most unsettling mystery of all, the silence. A literate, powerful civilization that minted its own coins and corresponded with Rome suddenly stops writing its own history. The records from Aksum's final centuries, they simply do not exist. Think of the strangeness of this void. This was an empire that carved its victories into stone and stamped the faces of its kings onto gold. They had a unique script, a voice in the ancient world. For that voice to fall completely silent during its most critical hour is profoundly unnatural. This absence of knowledge feels like a wound in history itself. It suggests the erasure was successful. The destruction was so total that it consumed not just people and buildings, but the very memory of the final generations. The empire didn't just fall, it was made to be forgotten. Here, then, is the terrible secret. The Aksumite Empire was not felled by a single enemy. It was undone by a perfect storm of curses, a chilling confluence of malevolent forces. The land turned against it. A plague bled it dry. The world outside became a prison, and into this dying kingdom, weakened and isolated, walked the final curse in human form to deliver the killing blow. The curses, when they came together, did not create a storm of fire and noise. They created a profound stillness. It was the feeling of a soul leaving a body. The vibrant heart of a great African power simply stopped beating, and in its place, a cold silence began to spread across the highlands, a spiritual winter from which there would be no spring. This was not a defeat. It was an exorcism. The very spirit of Aksum was being cast out of its own land, severed from the world, and pushed into the lonely darkness of forgotten things. The aftermath was a slow, quiet horror. The great capital itself, once a rival to Rome, was abandoned. Its people fled, not from an army they could see, but from a creeping dread they could feel in the soil. The royal court moved into the rugged, defensible highlands, seeking refuge in the mountains as their world collapsed behind them. They left their monuments behind. The towering, carved stelae, each one a testament to a king's power, became gravestones. The grand palaces, once filled with the sounds of a global empire, stood empty. They were not ruins of a civilization that had faded. They were the fresh remains of a kingdom that had been suddenly and violently silenced. The Aksumite Empire was not conquered, it was swallowed. The earth itself seemed to reclaim the cities, the roads, the ports. The lush fields turned barren, and the trade routes that were once the empire's lifeblood became haunted pathways. The power that had once shaped the ancient world was now a ghost story whispered by its own descendants. And here lies the most unsettling truth. The ghost of Aksum is not a specter haunting a castle wall. It is a profound and unnerving silence in the pages of history. It is a chapter that is not just incomplete. It is missing entirely, ripped out with such force that not even the edges remain. This was not a gradual decline. It was an erasure. A civilization that minted its own coins, that corresponded with emperors, that stood as a bastion of Christianity in the heart of Africa, simply stopped speaking to the world. The silence that follows is more terrifying than any scream. It serves as a chilling warning about what we believe is permanent. If a superpower like Aksum, a contemporary of Rome, can be so completely removed from the story of humanity, then what is truly safe? Its disappearance suggests that history is not a stone tablet. It is a scroll that can be burned, its ashes scattered by an unseen hand. This silence is evidence of a curse that works on a cosmic scale. It did not just kill people or topple buildings. It attacked the very idea of Aksum, consuming its memory, its records, and its place in the world. It is a form of magic so dark it seeks to make something that was, never have been at all. The true terror of Aksum is not that it fell, it is that it vanished. Its ghost walks through the empty pages of our own history books, a silent titan whose story is a void. And it leaves us with one final, cold question. What other great powers have been silenced forever? In the highlands of Ethiopia, stone giants still stand against the sky. These are the obelisks of Aksum, grave markers for kings of a silent empire. They are monuments to a power that spoke to the world and then suddenly stopped. Locals say that on moonless nights you can feel a cold presence near these stones, the weight of a history that was not just lost but buried on purpose. These carved towers are not just art, they are a final, desperate message. They point to the heavens, as if trying to tell a story that no living tongue remembers. Each one marks a royal tomb, most of which have been plundered for their gold, but not for their secrets. The real treasure of Aksum was its knowledge, its place in the world, and that treasure is what vanished completely. The story that survived was not written on stone or parchment. It was carried in whispers from one generation to the next. The tales spoke of a kingdom so rich and powerful that its fall could not be natural. It had to be the work of something else, a dark force, a punishment from the heavens, or a curse laid upon the land itself. One legend tells of the Ark of the Covenant, said to be hidden in an Aksumite church. It claims the empire's power came from this holy object. But it also says this power was a double-edged sword. Its presence brought greatness, but its misuse invited a terrible, silent wrath that would erase a kingdom from memory, leaving only stone and whispers behind. Modern explorers and historians search for answers in the dust. They map the foundations of vanished palaces and trace the routes of dead trade roads. But for every piece of pottery they find, a bigger question appears. The records simply stop. There are no final chronicles, no accounts of the last kings, no story of the end. There is only a sudden, vast emptiness in the historical record. To dig in this soil is to feel a strange resistance. It is as if the land itself holds its breath, guarding the silence. Local guides have reported tools going missing, strange sicknesses, and an overwhelming feeling of being watched from the shadows of the ruins. They say the empire does not want to be found. Its ghost is not one of a person, but of a whole civilization that chose to be forgotten. The true horror of Aksum's end may not be a single event. It was not a battle or a plague alone. The true curse was the slow, creeping sickness of being forgotten. Imagine a world power, a contemporary of Rome, slowly being choked, its voice growing fainter until no one could hear it scream. It was an erasure from the consciousness of the world. This process was helped by human hands and unseen forces. Gudit's fires burned the churches and libraries, a physical attack on memory. The plagues and changing climate were a biological attack on the people. The rise of new powers was a political attack on its influence. All these things worked together, a perfect storm of oblivion. But there is one final, more chilling possibility. What if the Aksumite Empire did not fall? What if it simply retreated? The people of the highlands are resilient and secretive. Perhaps the rulers saw the world changing, saw the darkness coming, and made a choice. They took their knowledge, their faith, and their most sacred treasures and vanished into the high, inaccessible mountains. If so, the empire never truly died. It became a living ghost, a hidden kingdom waiting in the quiet folds of the earth, its secrets protected not by walls but by centuries of silence. And the stone giants they left behind are not tombstones for the dead. They are markers, warning the outside world to stay away.